In my last video, I referenced a skill all INFJs should seek to develop if they want to become more confident in life. That skill is critical thinking. Critical thinking is more important now than ever. We are living in a society where feelings are running rampant and being used to justify so many things. However, feelings are subjective and not necessarily based on logic or fact. Before I get started, there is no way I could cover all there is to critical thinking in just one video. All I really want to do here is convince you of the need to teach yourself to think critically and to whet your appetite to want to do so. Critical thinking is important. The person who cannot think critically is susceptible to manipulation and could be taken advantage of. There's a freedom in being able to critically think. Critical thinking gives you more autonomy in life. You don't have to rely on what other people say. You can think for yourself. It sounds kind of crazy to even have to say these things, but they must be said. All people can and do think, but not all people know how to think or even do thinking well. Critical thinking must be something you set out to accomplish. It's not easy and it takes time. But really, what truly valuable things in life come easy? It's a process, and you get better at it as you go along. It takes discipline, mental discipline, but I know there are those out there like me who love the challenge of mental discipline. Critical thinking is done objectively. It's being able to put aside feelings and emotions. I'm not saying you should completely dismiss feelings and emotions. This is not possible, as no one can think in a vacuum. Our thinking is influenced by so many other things in life, and to say that we should put away all of those things in order to see something in an absolute objective sense is not possible. And especially for an INFJ, I think it would be to deny ourselves to dismiss feelings we have about things. As I've said so many times before, we usually start our thinking process with a feeling about something. But for it to become something we hold on to as true, and for that feeling to become worthy of discussion, we must prove it with thinking. We make use of reasoning for a purpose, and that's in order to come to conclusions in our thinking and to make judgments. This is a silly example, but we could have a feeling which says, I feel we should only eat carrots. When someone asks us why, we can't very well say, well, I feel it's true. Or, I've only eaten carrots my whole life and look how healthy I am. Or, because carrots taste so good. We have to be able to prove, or at least give solid evidence to show that carrots are all we should eat. And what's the reason? Because we want the whole world to understand how beneficial carrots are, and we want the whole world to be healthy through the eating of carrots. But if we can't prove our point to someone else, there will be no convincing someone else of the truth about carrots, and no one will listen, and no one will eat carrots, and the whole world will miss out. For me, critical thinking is about questioning. It's digging deeper, the always asking why, which is our bread and butter. I believe our type can take to critical thinking like a duck takes to water. We are naturally suited to critical thinking because we don't like to rest with what appears to be. We want to see what really is. Also, I believe we desire independence in our thinking. Again, think of the little child who asks his or her parents, why? When the question is answered, it usually leads to another why question. I think I stopped asking deep questions as a fairly young child because no one could adequately answer my questions. Children really do get it. It's a shame critical thinking isn't really taught in public schools because children have a desire to learn through critical thinking. I don't know that children want adults to think for them. They have a natural curiosity about life and learning, and we are very similar to children in this way. Do you really want someone else to do your thinking for you, or do you desire to do it for yourself? Critical thinking is hearing what's really being said. You should always ask yourself what the underlying assumptions are in a statement. I think of it as taking what's being said and distilling it down to basics. It's kind of like panning for gold. You scoop up a big mess of muddy riverbed material. You start sifting in order to see what is really there. A good place to start is understanding what's called logical fallacies. You can distill what is being said down to a fallacy. A logical fallacy is an error in reasoning that undermines the logic of an argument. There are many logical fallacies. You can do a simple search to find websites devoted to them, as well as solid examples of each. This is a very good place to start if you wish to learn the skill of critical thinking. This is where I spent a lot of time when first learning how to critically think. So what are logical fallacies? I'll just give you a few examples. You can look them up for yourself. One of the most common is what's called an ad hominem argument. In Latin, this means to the man. It's attacking a person's character instead of challenging what the person is actually saying. The common way an ad hominem argument is used is to say something like, "The local gardening club is unreliable as a source of gardening information because their president is a drunk." Does this mean the entire gardening club should be dismissed as having no expertise when it comes to gardening because of one person's behavior? Can you separate the claims from the person and see if what they are saying objectively has merit? This tactic can be used to dismiss the claims of one person or even entire groups of people. Another logical fallacy is the appeal to emotion. You probably recognize this one from childhood. You should eat all the food on your plate. There are starving children all over the world, and you should be grateful you even have food to eat. It's not that this idea itself is false. Of course, one should be grateful for the things they have when others have to go without. But to suggest that a bad feeling for someone else's condition in life as the reason why you should clean your plate is problematic. Here are a few more, but I'll use a statement to illustrate. So here's the statement. I see a bluebird on the maple tree. Before we talk about fallacies, let's first look at what's being assumed here. Remember, an important part of critical thinking is about recognizing assumptions. So to say, I see a bluebird on the maple tree is to assume many things. Identity is being assumed. You started with the word I. I see is speaking of a perceptual event. You are assuming the meanings of words. You are assuming the meaning of the English language. You are assuming physical relations, such as between birds and trees. You are assuming scientific categories of birds and trees. You are assuming grammar usage. You are assuming the reality of the external world. You are assuming laws of logic. You are assuming scientific truths, such as light refraction. You are assuming your eyes are seeing things normally. There are other assumptions as well, but I'll stop there because I've made my point. Do you see how just one statement assumes so many things? So let's take this statement, change it just a little bit, and have some fun with it. Let's have person A make the statement, and person B engage in critical thinking to see what can be learned. Person A, I see a bluebird on the maple tree, and it will fly away. Person B, how do you know that's a maple tree? Person A, my mother told me it was. Person B, well, just because Mom said it's a maple tree doesn't make it true. This fallacy is the appeal to authority. You cannot say that just because X person said something makes it automatically true. The problem with appealing to authority is that people are fallible and can make mistakes. It's like going to the doctor for a consultation for a major problem. We all hear how one should get a second opinion. Just because the first doctor said something does not automatically mean you should accept it. You should see what another doctor says, and then perhaps even another. Get several opinions in order that you can make an informed decision. Person A, I see a bluebird on the maple tree, and it will fly away. Person B, how do you know it's blue? Person A, are you crazy? All bluebirds are blue. Person B, have you seen all bluebirds in the world to verify that all bluebirds are blue? This example is a bit silly, but it's actually a real thing. Yes, we probably can make certain assumptions about things such as bluebirds being blue without actually having to see all bluebirds in the world. At some point, conversation would not be possible if this is the way we always approached it. But truly, this is taking something for granted. And taking things for granted is a bias. And do rational people take things for granted? Some people will say, for example, miracles are impossible. Are they truly impossible? Or is it better to say unlikely or extremely rare? How much would you have to know about science and reality and the supernatural to know that miracles are impossible? Person A: I see a bluebird on the maple tree and it will fly away. Person B: how do you know it will fly away? Person A: well, because I've seen bluebirds on trees before and they always fly away. Person B: how do you know that just because bluebirds have flown away from trees in the past, that they will fly away from trees in the future? This last example is one of hasty generalization. You take what you have learned in your limited experience and make it fit for everything. So how can you know the bluebird will fly away? How can you know what you've learned in the past will apply to the future? How can you know the future will be like the past? Who really has universal vision? Who can see abstract things? This whole video is about something we can't see, which is our thinking process. Logic is a tool we use to aid our thinking and reasoning. Can we see logic? Logic is outside of your person, outside of all persons. It's something universal and absolute. In order for you to develop the skill of critical thinking, you have to continually stretch your mind. It's like developing muscle. When you lift weights, you are actually tearing your muscles so they can rebuild and come back stronger. That's what you're doing with your mind when you engage in critical thinking. You are stretching it in order to make it stronger. Even though your brain isn't technically a muscle, you should treat it as if it were by exercising it regularly. I realize I may not become as good at spotting logical fallacies in real time as, say, an NT type, but I am getting better every day. Practice makes perfect, and this even applies to critical thinking. The more you familiarize yourself with the concepts, the more you'll start to see them. And use NTs in your life or seek some out. I think we reject NTs because they challenge us and we don't like it. It makes us feel stupid, so we want to reject them. But we shouldn't. Use them. Pick their brains. They can really help sharpen your skills. But choose ones who are good critical thinkers. I would say NT types, just like the INFJ, have the potential to become great critical thinkers. I would even say they probably take to it more easily than we will, but that doesn't mean that all NTs will become great critical thinkers. And likewise, that doesn't mean that we can't if we apply ourselves. Also, I would suggest that you watch debates and see if you can spot logical fallacies. I know there are debate channels on this platform. And there's lots of interesting material out there about critical thinking as well. Start small, don't overwhelm yourself. Remember, baby steps. That's how I've accomplished all the big stuff in my life. I've started small and was consistent in the steps I implemented. And if all this is a bit overwhelming, start simple. Start with questions. Even if you don't know how to challenge the other person, you can always start digging with questions. And this is what I was referring to in my previous video when I said, you don't necessarily have to understand exactly all the factual information that's being presented. You can start asking questions in order to start challenging the other person without knowing everything about the topic at hand. So here are a few good ones to start. What do you mean? How do you know? And what are the consequences of what you're saying? And the beauty of asking such questions like this is that usually these questions lead to others. Keep digging, keep asking more questions, and see where it goes. That's enough for now. I hope I gave you some interesting things to think about. Don't be afraid of your thinking. Dig deep and see what you can discover.